Good evening, Madam Vice Chair, members of committee. This meeting is now being live streamed, and I would turn it over to you, Madam Vice Chair.
Okay, I apologize for starting off this way. No idea what happened, but these things happen. So I will start the meeting with reading the notes here. So welcome, everyone, to the September 14th, 2021 Heritage Richmond Hill meeting. Tonight's meeting is an electronic meeting being held pursuant to Section 238, 3.3 of the Municipal Act 2001, due to efforts to contain the spread of COVID-19 and to protect all individuals. City facilities will not be open to the public to attend meetings until further notice. So on behalf of the committee, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Tom Richkowski, I hope I pronounced that correctly, from the York Catholic District School Board. He was appointed by the council yesterday as a representative of the education community on the Heritage Richmond Hill Committee. Unfortunately, with the short notice given for tonight's meeting, Mr. Richkowski is unable to attend, but we hope to see him next month. Please note that we have received regrets from Al Itwar, James Counter, and Councillor Karen Silowitz. The public had the opportunity to submit written correspondence regarding agenda matters by email to the clerk's office. All written correspondence received by noon would have been included on the agenda, but there was none received. The public also had the opportunity to apply to appear as an electronic delegation, either by video conference or by telephone by noon today. There were no delegation requests received, so as Vice Chair of the committee, I now call the meeting to order, and the first item on the business on the agenda is to appoint a new chair for the remainder of the 2018-2022 terms of the council. Okay. So we have our agenda. I'm looking forward here. It's okay.
If I might, Madam Vice Chair, normally in this situation, we would just look for a motion to appoint a named individual as chair for the rest of the term.
Okay, I was not certain what the thing was, so what the procedure was. So I see David's hand.
So I would put forward a motion to appoint Marge, given that she's the vice chair, to be the chair for the remainder of the term under the circumstances that we find ourselves in. Marge, I hope you'll be able to accept that, but I think that's what I would like to present to the committee at this time.
Okay. Thank you, David. Yes, I will accept the nomination.
Okay, so I guess we would vote then on that, Mr. Hike?
That is correct, Madam Vice Chair. You would just call the vote on that motion.
Okay, since you can hear me, I vote for Marge.
Okay. What is the format for voting? Just show of hands?
Show of hands should be sufficient as long as you, as the chair of this meeting, are satisfied that you are seeing everyone's vote and can rule accordingly.
Yes. Can we just put a show of hands? I see everyone voting, so yes, that's, yeah. Very good. Okay.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Okay. I now, with all this computer issues and unplugging things, I have lost my agenda, so I am just going to go find the agenda again.
If I might, and Madam Chair, actually in the meantime, because it wouldn't have been noted on your agenda, but as a result of your appointment as chair, it would now be a proper course of action to appoint a vice chair for the remainder of this term of council, simply by doing a motion similar to what the committee just did to appoint you as chair.
Okay, so it's my prerogative to appoint someone vice chair. Is that correct?
To you, Madam Chair, no, the committee itself would have to choose and vote on it. So it would be in this situation as chair, you could look to another member of the committee to move a motion to appoint someone as vice chair, and then call a vote on that, similar to any other motion.
Okay. So are there any motions to appoint someone to be vice chair? Dan, Barb, Ellen, Doris, Jenica, Doris.
So, Madam Chair, I would be pleased to put forward a motion to nominate Barb DeMembro as your vice chair.
Thank you. Barb, do you accept that?
You're on mute.
Yes, I'll accept it.
Excellent.
Okay. So we show of hands for having Barb as our vice chair.
Yes, I showed my hand.
Okay, thank you, Helen. Okay. Well, I think that is business is done, so we will move on. Okay. Okay, give me some instructions for next thing, because I'm still struggling with finding this agenda with
Adoption of the agenda.
Adoption of the agenda. Thank you.
I move
I'll
to
move
adopt.
that. Okay,
Okay.
Dan can move that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and do we need a seconder for that? No. Okay, very good.
No,
okay.
thank you. Just to clarify, Madam Chair, no, there are no seconders at committee, so it's just a mover.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Is it possible that someone send me the agenda? I've got things screwed up here, so then I can just easily proceed and put it on my second screen. So.
I believe that Karen will send this to you right away by email.
Perfect.
In the meantime, Madam Chair, it would be you do need to call a vote on the motion to adopt the agenda.
Okay. So, motion to please. Shall we adopt this agenda? Okay. Agenda is adopted. Thank you.
The next item of business on the agenda, Madam Chair, and Karen is emailing you, it is the declarations of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof.
Okay. So, are there any pecuniary interests? Being none, we will adopt the agenda and proceed. Okay. Okay. Next on the agenda is, because I still have no.
The next on the agenda, Madam Chair, if it still hasn't opened, it's the adoption of the minutes of the Heritage Richmond Hill meeting, HRH 05-21, held July 6, 2021.
Okay. Okay. I still have not got the agenda. Okay. So we are going to, any issues with the minutes? Okay, seeing none, they will be passed. Okay.
I apologize, Madam Chair, we do need a mover and then a vote.
Okay. David moves. And a vote. I now see my agenda in my inbox. Okay. You want to motion me to the next?
So certainly, Madam Chair, for the information of the committee, there were no delegations. So we are now at scheduled business, in particular, item 6.1, which is the memorandum from Pamela Vega, a Heritage and Urban Design Planner dated September 14th, 2021, regarding staff's response related to the process improvements for listing properties on the Heritage Register, and a presentation by Joanne Moon, Manager, Urban Design, and Pamela Vega, Heritage and Urban Design Planner.
Okay. So, thank you. Are we fine just for starting the presentation now?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Just a little brief summary about why we're bringing this forward. At the beginning of the summer, Dan Kelly, on behalf of the designation subcommittee, provided us with 2 draft documents related to the listing process and asked for our review and to provide them with comments and to provide the committee with comments as to what we think of these draft comments. So first of all, we want to thank Dan Kelly for his tireless work in doing research into the listing process and drafting these documents that we were asked to review. This proactive work is really appreciated by staff It's also been very helpful because it's identified potential ways in which the listing process may be made more efficient and has led staff to look into confirming what the provincial best practices currently are. We would all benefit from the research done. Next slide, please. So on May 4th, Dan Kelly, on behalf of the Designation Subcommittee, submitted 2 documents for staff's review related to the listing process. Because of recent changes to the Ontario Heritage Act that require research earlier in the listing process, these documents are being proposed as tools to help support city staff in meeting the requirements of the Ontario Heritage Act. Next slide, please. And the first document that was submitted was a nomination form. Next slide. This nomination form is proposed to be used by anyone who wishes to nominate a property for consideration to be listed on the Heritage Register. The form provides the user the opportunity to input information on the property that may be useful in determining its candidacy for listing, and includes both descriptive information, such as building material, as well as interpretive information, such as whether a property supports an area's character. The information collected in this form is proposed to improve the listing process because it helps formalize the nomination process. The purpose of the nomination form is also to help make the listing process more transparent, as it will make the nomination form accessible to the public. And right now, there is no formal form through which someone can suggest a property to be considered for listing. And finally, similarly to the first point, the purpose of the nomination form is to complete some of the preliminary research that will be needed to determine a property's candidacy for listing. Next slide. So city staff have reviewed the nomination form and have found that its design is user-friendly and the layout makes it clear what information is being requested. Staff believe that this form would be helpful to HRA and to city staff because it will gather the information, the background information needed to help determine whether a property may have the cultural heritage value or interest needed to be considered for listing on the Heritage Register. Next slide. The second document that was submitted was an evaluation sheet. And next slide. This document evaluates a property's cultural heritage value or interest using criteria created by the federal government to assess federally owned buildings. It uses a numerically weighted system to categorize a property into one of 3 categories. 1, likely to obtain designation status. 2, possibly may obtain designation status. And 3, unlikely to obtain designation status. This builds on the nomination form and is proposed to be used by heritage specialists, be it HRH members or city staff, as the next step in determining a property's candidacy for listing. Next slide. City staff is in support of using an evaluation form to screen properties for listing candidacy. However, there are concerns surrounding the use of numerically weighted evaluation systems. There currently is only one evaluation system that is endorsed by provincial legislation. This is Ontario Regulation 9-06, which is a value-based system. As numerically weighted systems are not endorsed by provincial legislation, there are concerns that the city's heritage decisions may not hold up should a listing be objected. And while numerically weighted criteria may be preferred to be used to provide a more subjective assessment, it should be noted that numerically weighted systems are still subjective. For example, allocating more points in one area implies that it holds more importance than other criteria. There's also concern that using a numerically weighted system may cause some properties with cultural heritage value to be overlooked. As per provincial legislation, a property needs only to meet one criteria noted under Ontario Regulation 9-06 to be considered to have cultural heritage value. Numerically weighted criteria, however, does not take this value-based approach into account. And finally, there's concern that using a numerically weighted system may create extra and redundant work. Since the provincial criteria for cultural heritage value or interest is identified through Ontario Regulation 9-06, which is a value-based system, city staff would be required to evaluate a property again using provincial criteria in order to ensure that our recommendations are justifiable to City Council and potentially the Ontario Land Tribunal. As such, city staff have reservations on using numerically weighted criteria to determine a property's candidacy for identification on the Heritage Register, and therefore are reluctant to support its use. Next slide, please. And the following slides in this presentation will review the research that has been done on numerically weighted criteria and will provide details on staff's concerns regarding this sort of criteria. First, we will provide a summary of the city's previous work done during 2014-2016 on formulating a numerically weighted system. Second, we will review the current professional opinions from across Ontario regarding the use of a numerically weighted criteria. And finally, we will provide a summary of other evaluation systems that complement the cultural heritage value criteria identified through Ontario Regulation 9-06. Next slide, please. In 2014, the city hired heritage consultant ASI to draft numerically weighted evaluation criteria to determine whether a property is eligible for designation under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And as part of this work, ASI benchmarked the practices of municipalities to determine what the current best practices are. They found that municipalities recommended exclusively using provincially regulated value-based criteria. They also found that numerically weighted systems are labor-intensive to maintain in areas that are facing high numbers of development applications. Finally, this benchmarking practice found that consultants working on projects within municipalities used a qualitative application, not a quantitative application, of provincial criteria outlined in Ontario Regulation 9-06. Next slide, please. ASI also reviewed the decisions of the Conservation Review Board to determine the efficacy and legitimacy of using evaluation criteria. The Conservation Review Board was a ruling body for matters related to the Ontario Heritage Act, and it has since been consolidated into the body now known as the Ontario Land Tribunal. So ASI found that the CRB acknowledged that Ontario Regulation 9-06 is the only recognized cultural heritage criteria in Ontario, and that this criteria is the CRB's preferred operational framework. They also found that the CRB may have asked a municipality to use Ontario Regulation 9-06 even when the municipality had already used its own criteria. Finally, ASI found that clear standards for research and analysis must be developed, documented, and followed as part of the evaluation process when applying the criteria of Ontario Regulation 9-06. ASI concluded that heritage evaluation approaches should adhere to Ontario Regulation 9-06, and that value-based systems that use broad categories such as excellent or good are most desirable to use. Next slide, please. And during this past summer, city staff have reached out to heritage professionals across Ontario to ask whether they currently use numerically weighted criteria. They found that the majority of heritage professionals use provincially legislated Ontario Regulation 9-06. Respondents stated that they chose to use this regulation because it is the only provincially recognized criteria for determining cultural heritage value. It was also noted that because municipalities are now required to provide a statement explaining why a property is cultural heritage value or interest when deciding to list it on the Heritage Register, and because ministry staff recommend that Ontario Regulation 9-06 be used to help create the statement, using provincially legislated criteria felt like the better choice for many of the municipalities that were consulted. It would also help to ensure that they could justify new listings should an objection be received. Because of this, heritage professionals in Ontario do not recommend using numerically weighted systems. Next slide, please. A few respondents also noted that their respective municipalities had established systems to complement the criteria found in Ontario Regulation 9-06. In Toronto, for example, they have developed historic context statements for different areas of the city to provide background information for properties to be assessed. This has led to a greater understanding of these areas and has also provided a standard set of information against which properties may be assessed. And in Hamilton, they have set up a classification system to help identify and prioritize properties that may be candidates for designation or listing. The 4 categories that they've identified are 1, significant built resources, 2, character defining resources, 3, character supporting resources, and 4, inventory properties. Properties that are grouped into one of the first 3 categories are recommended for listing on the register, and properties that are classified in the first category are identified as candidates for designation and are added to the work plan for a more comprehensive review at a later date. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, staff support the use of the nomination form, but suggest that it be used as a fact-gathering document only, and that the information being requested be extended to provide a more fulsome description of the property. Staff also recommend that questions that are more interpretive in nature be removed, and that the recommendation section also be removed. And while staff support the use of evaluation criteria in principle, they are hesitant to use numerically weighted criteria. Instead, staff recommend that value-based criteria based on Ontario Regulation 9-06 be used to determine whether property merits inclusion on the Heritage Register. And finally, staff support members of HRH and residents of Richmond Hill nominating properties to be included on the Heritage Register. And next slide. And we would love to hear feedback from the rest of HRH and have proposed some items for the committee to consider, such as expanding the listing nomination form, revising the evaluation sheet to reflect the criteria of Ontario Regulation 9-06, reviewing the feasibility or usefulness of drafting historic context statements, and creating a classification system similar to the one currently used in Hamilton. And again, we want to thank the designation subcommittee, especially Dan Kelly, again, for their work and for providing these draft documents. It's proactive, passionate members like them that help elevate heritage committees to greater heights. So thank you very much for your time. We'll now open the floor for any questions or comments that you may have.
Thank you very much, Pamela. Do we need to move to accept this report?
Madam Chair, you can simply move to, I would say you remove to receive both the presentation and the memorandum at this time.
Okay. Someone, Doris? Thank you.
I move that we accept both the memorandum and the presentation by Pamela Vega at this time.
Very good. Good. Okay, comments, questions? Dan, I expect something from you.
Yeah, no, I do have some comments. Do we have to vote on the motion or?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, you would actually have the discussion before you vote on the motion.
Okay.
The reason.
Okay. Okay, so a couple of contextual comments first before I get into the detail of the analysis. So the presentation and the recommendation was a process of which these 2 documents were part of. So when I say that, to me, there's 3 key things that are involved in the process or supporting the process. There's the process itself. There's the people in the organization of the context of the process. And the third thing is the technology or the supporting documents, which is really what the focus of the analysis that was done and presented to us here. Nothing about the process, but it's important to bring that all into discussion because the recommendation isn't qualitative versus quantitative. It's actually a blend of the 2 if you look at the process and the way it's looked at. So that's just a general comment. So I'm going to focus on the focus of the presentation. The other thing to mention on the context part is, and I think it hits on some key points that staff brought up, is there's been an evolution in the legislative process the regulations that have actually gone over the last significant amount of time. And what I mean by that is that initially to get this thing going, it was broad brushed. It allowed all sorts of leeways. Now I see things tightening up. So therefore, there is a need to tighten up a little bit, and was the motivation to identify a process with the tools. I didn't really focus on the organization part and the people part. That is a weakness, I believe, that needs to be discussed and addressed. And I have had discussions with the Historical Society as well with the library, because they're key elements in terms of being able to support the process and some of the things that we have to do to make it work. So with regards to the presentation itself, there is a tremendous emphasis, 90% of what I see in terms of the comments with regards to the evaluation template. Really, it's not a document, it's a template. Is this reference to regulations 906. Now, I don't look at it that way. I see very much it does fit those criterias. I'm really at a loss to see how it doesn't. If you do look at the three criteria that it identifies in the regulation, and you look at the template and the wording, and it's more of a document that's a little bit more detailed and sort of leads you through. It's very much like a checklist, if you want to call it that, because it does ask you questions and uses actually the terminology that's in 906. So that part of the comments, I'm not sure I really agree with that, but that's a major part of why I think the conclusions are addressed. So I think that's something that needs to be discussed a little bit more. The other part that I accept and I agree with is that the regulation 906 does say only one of the three has to meet, and the template was designed to really look at a total. That can easily be changed. That's not an issue. The last, I guess, comment that really is fundamental to the template itself is the comment about value versus qualitative versus quantitative. Like, we're using all these terminologies, implying that it's a one or the other. And that gets me back to the process, where the process really is a blend of the two. The idea of the template was to funnel. If you recall, we sort of had a funnel that sort of showed how you're taking broad nominations that come in and funnel them down to select ones that then would be evaluated by staff using whatever method and technology they wanted to use. So I saw it as very much not an either or, but actually a blending of the two. But having said that, I totally understand the comments about it's not part of the current benchmarking that other municipalities use. And I actually like the idea of maybe what Toronto and Hamilton's doing. So I think we should, look at that a little bit more. The template can be, cannot be. I mean, it's really, if we're only using the Heritage Committee as a nomination, then the template really becomes up to staff as to what they want to do. The idea there, again, as part of the process, was to involve a number of stakeholders other than simply the committee itself, because in the process we identified other people filling out the form that are part of the stakeholders. So for example, that could be the Heritage Society, in addition to members of the committee. It could very much be architects and other professionals within the community that have a vested interest and have shown interest. So the template would be used as a consensus to bring you through. As to the relative weightings and the use of numbers in there, I mean, I can definitely appreciate reluctance on a lot of people to do that sort of thing. I very strongly agree with using this kind of a tool, simply because my whole career has been based on that and my training has been based on that. So I don't see it as an either or. I see it really as a blend, that this would, if I can put it in a context in some processes where you're using a qualitative only, it requires very highly skilled people that are experts in particular areas to verbalize and put down all sorts of stuff for I guess backing up their conclusions. I find that also checklists and then quantitative sort of tying to that supplements it. It doesn't replace that, it sort of supplements it. And it allows for a broader base of people, not highly skilled experts. Somebody like the committee could, use that to evaluate something. But
Dan, do you think we could have maybe Pamela and Joanne respond to some of those things?
I'm just going to
Okay.
conclude in 2 seconds here, and then I'll just open it up to whatever. The important part to that is the people and organizational part, the education that's required, the training that would be required to use this, which is something I didn't address in the recommendations, but it is something that is definitely required if the committee is going to support that kind of a process. If it's simply going to go to a nomination sort of process, probably doesn't need to go through that much training and education per se. It's just whatever people's opinions and orientation to heritage that they already have. So that's basically it. I mean, in conclusion, I can understand where staff is coming from on it. I think it's misrepresentative of the process that I sort of put in to some extent. I think the criticism on the regulation part, is maybe not quite what, if you look at the federal stuff that I had put together and you look at the details, you'll find that the wording and everything is very, very complementary and ties in very much and goes into a little bit more detail, but still uses the structure that the legislation has. So thanks very much. I thought that was great, and I appreciate the feedback.
Well, thank you, Dan, for all those comments. So I'm thinking that Pamela and Joanne should respond to some of those comments.
Yeah, I can respond to some of them, and I apologize, Dan, if I don't get to all of your the comments that you've made. If I've missed something, please jump in. The first one she made about the wording being similar to Ontario Regulation 9-06. The general criteria that's noted in the evaluation form is the same. It is associative, design, physical, and contextual. That's correct, but then it's the subcategories that it differs, and it might not seem like that big of a difference, but it might be enough that it may not be directly applicable to Ontario Regulation 9-06. So a good example of that is the contextual value. Under Ontario Regulation 9-06, such a mouthful, it's noted the property has contextual value because it, one, either is important in defining, maintaining, or supporting the character of an area. Two, is physically, functionally, visually, or historically linked to its surroundings. Or three, is a landmark. So in the evaluation form, it is one of them is noted landmark, but the other two, it's not exactly the same. So even if it might meet the evaluation criteria, it may not be able to be applied directly into Ontario Regulation 9-06. So that's where I think our concerns come from, like that if we just take out the wording exactly as is for Ontario Regulation 9-06 and plop it in, it'll be easier for us to support if we do receive any objections. So it's a minor thing, but it might make things a little easier in the long run. And in terms of it being possibly a mixture of the qualitative and the quantitative assessments being blended together, I think there might be a little bit of a misunderstanding as to what qualitative means. It almost is like a check mark, like a checklist as to which ones they meet. Under provincial legislation, we do only need to meet one of the criteria under Ontario Regulation 9-06. Generally, that's usually not enough for us. We like a property to meet as many as possible. But this can be done by members of the community, as they say, like that. we believe that this has contextual value because it's a landmark. It has design or physical value because it's a good example of, Italian architecture. That it's, if we want to bring these arguments to the tribunal, then we would need a heritage professional, but we don't need to have professional expertise in order to provide our suggestions to this. So it's not, by relying on qualitative criteria, it doesn't mean that we're preventing certain parts of the population from providing their input. It's just that the suggestions may not be able to be directly provided to regulation boards. That would have to be someone with a professional, expertise for it. But yeah, this is something that I think with minimal experience, the layman would be able to understand it.
Okay, thank you, Pamela. Is there comments from someone else? Barb, Helen, Doris.
So thank you for the floor, Chair. I understand what the staff have said, and I understand where they're coming from. Unfortunately, I haven't read Regulation 906 since last spring sometime, so I have to go back and review it. But I will say to you, I understand the direction that staff wants to take, because when we have a property that we believe should be designated as a heritage property, and that designation gets objected to or appealed, we need, as a committee and as a municipality, to be on very solid ground to defend our position. And if the practice across the province is to use what is in 906, then I think that that's the direction that we should be going in. But I would suggest to you that I think we need to look more closely at what the City of Hamilton has done, because I think that that's the kind of approach that is the right approach in terms of mixing the various components of what we need to assess when we want to ensure that a property is designated as a heritage property. So I would very much support our continuing this work and looking at how we can adopt for the City of Richmond Hill this kind of an approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Doris. Comments, David? I think he unmuted, put himself out of video instead of out of mute.
Sorry, there we go. Okay, sorry about that. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to staff. Pamela, that was a very thorough presentation, as expect. I do think that this is probably one of the most lively discussions that we've had on HRH since I've been a member. And Dan, I suspect that you might have had something to do with that in bringing this work forward. And I know you've done a lot of thinking and a lot of working and a lot of contemplating about this. And I think we're all pulling in the same direction. It's just really, in my opinion, and in my time on this committee, especially in this term with this group, we're all pulling in the same direction. We just need to figure out how we get to the destination that we all expect to get to. So I think, I don't really have a lot to add to this, this discussion. But I think what I would say is that I would encourage staff in this committee to keep moving forward. I feel like staff is actually, giving this perhaps a little bit more priority consideration than they might otherwise, because of discussion that has been brought forward by this committee and Dan specifically. And I think that that's good. So I think, we're looking at some process improvements here that, will help us to be able to protect the heritage that we're all committed to protecting. So anyway, I don't have a lot of concrete stuff to add, but I do thank all the members of the committee and staff for working collaboratively on this. So thank you.
Thank you, David. Comments from anyone else? Barb, Jenica.
Oh, can't hear
Can't
you.
hear you.
Do you have your speakers at 0 like I did? I figured out what my problem was.
Oh yeah, you're off the phone.
Yeah, I hated that.
Was that what it was? It was.
I had my speakers muted and just, I realized, yeah, this afternoon I was doing something. So
That happened to me
Jenica,
through a workshop too.
Oh, I see her lips moving, but I can't hear her.
Oh no.
oh,
Sign language.
Jenica, it, because we were able to hear you earlier. If you go under, if you try this, under the, where the mute button is, if you, click on the, go down through the list and say leave computer audio, and then turn it back on, sometimes that works.
No.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I don't know how that worked. But there we go. Thanks, guys. That was fun. Okay, I just wanted to ask a question of Pamela through the chair. Through you, Chair, Pamela, I just want to check my understanding. So you're saying that if we take this form that Dan has created, the evaluation form, and just removed the numbers, leaving the categories of excellent, very good, and good, we're already taking a step forward. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
And
a
then
good
the
summary.
second step forward would be that we change the wording so that it pretty much mimics spot on the regulation.
Yep.
Okay. But if we were to make those changes, how would you feel about the form? Is it then a useful tool?
I think absolutely, yes. And then there would be a matter of, Dan, what you were mentioning earlier, the process, like how could we implement this form to be used in our current processes or future, how we can change our processes to incorporate this. Yeah, I feel like it would be great. And this would be great even if, Joanne, tell me if you agree or disagree, that this could be something we could even provide to our consultants so they could include in their cultural heritage impact assessments. So they already have a template.
Yeah, I think definitely if we actually provide that, then from the very get-go, when we do a research, our framework is already embedded, and it's already already provide a structure that is based on the 906 definition. So I mean that it's and I think that the form is really, really well designed and easy to understand. And so for laymen who is not sure, or they can actually put their opinion of that is excellent or good, but the form also required to have more information and technical information about the property. I mean, those are extremely helpful. The interpretation of it, depending on who uses it. And so the interpretation will have different varied degrees of, I would say, contribution to the final outcome. But I would say, the form itself is extremely helpful. It collects everybody's, questions into one and help focus what is important on the property that we need to look at. So yes, I think that the form itself it's actually a wonderful step forward to our process.
thank you. Any other comments? Barb, were you going to say something?
I really don't have anything to add, but I do like the idea of the form. I like the idea that we want to move forward with it and continue to look at it, because I think the more that a property has, there's basic criteria that everyone's on the same page with it, because even some of the reports that people write, like an architectural firm can put their own slant on it. And when we have information that's standard of how we always look at a property, I think it's a good thing. It just sort of, it's standard, it makes it standard across the board. Yeah. And what Hamilton did, I appreciate what Pam spoke about that. I don't necessarily understand everything they did. I'll have to sort of look over that and get it around my head. But yes, I like the idea of this process and the fact that we can have some added standards to what we do. That's all.
Very good. Thank you, Barb. Helen, I don't see you, but can you, I was going to invite Helen to say something. Helen?
Oh, thank you. Yes, I just want to say kudos to Dan for taking initiative of creating such a form. I would think it's very useful.
Okay. Okay. Dan, do you want to say something? And then I just have a couple of questions and comments.
Yeah, it's more of a word of caution, actually. The form itself actually comes from the Ontario government. I plagiarized it, so no wonder everybody agrees with it. The word of caution is, I envision that this stuff could be put on the website to make it accessible to anybody who wants to submit the nomination. The challenge is going to be in the future, as we've always had this challenge, is it's difficult to write and put all the stuff in here based on your common knowledge of a particular building. You'd have to do some research. The whole premise on the legislation, the process, and everything we're talking about here is that you start off nominating, and it's going to come from somebody who's really not skilled. Let's say, for example, it's the public, and it's somebody who says, I like that particular building, and then they have to go fill out this form. And they're going to have difficulty doing that. Now, if they're very diligent and they want to do the right thing and research it, that gets into a discussion that I've already initiated with the library on, and maybe it's something more of a workshop. We talked about workshops before. We talked about involving the, I'm sorry, Pamela, but I've forgotten the organization that you had do a great presentation to us on heritage. They do, they work with municipalities and create workshops and stuff. So there's still a training element or a documentation element to support the document if it goes on the website or for the public to see. And that I know is going to be a challenge just from my past experience. So, I mean, I fully support the concepts. No issues with regards to adjusting the template to whatever you want to use. Terminologies, even the way it works behind the scenes, you can put the good, very good, and whatever in there, but behind the scenes there'll be some mechanism to create a rating or something that you can take as the three categories that I had initially put in there. So just that one word of caution that I would make, but I think we're all agreed that nomination form is a good form to go forward with.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. And just my couple of comments. The example from Hamilton where they presented more information on those different districts and what they were all about. Is that possible for it to do? Like what would really be, I'd love to see that happen if we understood the BI, the Village, the Gormley, those other places, Headford Park, like if we could have that more information. So that's one question. Also, I wanted to just note that 2023 is Richmond Hill's 150th anniversary. The Historical Society has been contacted on what they want to do, and having workshops and discussions about heritage is something that's being considered. I think there's an opportunity to put these two ideas together to increase the general knowledge, awareness, interest that I think, Dan, you really are pushing forward. So I think if we could blend those two, I feel a little bad saying, hey, we should do this, and I won't be here on the committee to do the work, but I still be with the Historical Society. So anyways, those are my comments. So if someone, Pam or Joanne, you could tell us, is it possible, or what sort of process would there be for there to be presented a greater understanding of those heritage areas, I guess?
Well, that's a very good idea. I think that as an initiative, it sounds very promising. Unfortunately, I need to actually get back and consult with my other colleagues, culture and recreation. Certainly, it's something that we can look into.
Okay. As an inexperienced and flustered chair, I asked for the report to be accepted before we had the discussion. So I think we had a really good discussion. So I think just because of that, we should not to negate your what you did, Doris, but can we just vote on it accepting this again? Okay. Thank you. Okay. Sorry, Stephen, I hope that doesn't screw you up with your having to keep us all on track. Okay. Okay, I think we can move to, Stephen didn't say anything, so I'll take that as a positive. Okay, mapping of Richmond Hills heritage resources. Joanne, you were going to present something?
Pamela is going to, we worked on this together.
Okay.
Yes, it's a good news update. We've been in discussions with our GIS team about possibly creating an interactive map of the Heritage Register of all of the heritage properties within Richmond Hill. And they said, yes, this is something that we can do. We can have something that you can hover your mouse over the map and suddenly something will pop up and you can see photographs, a little blurb about what the property's history is, and also provide the public with the opportunity to provide their own information or photographs that they may have, historic photographs, current photographs, and then incorporate them slowly into the map. So it would be, it wouldn't be a static, one time, this is what heritage was in Richmond Hill, 2021, September 14th. It'll be continually changing. And they said that it hopefully something that they said that they could be able to do it. So we're very excited about what this map will look like. But in the meantime, because it might take some time and some work to get this all together, they have provided us with a PDF version of a mapping of all of the heritage properties in Richmond Hill. I can see if I can share my screen. It's quite a large PDF, but if you zoom in, you can see exactly what, where all the heritage houses are, all the listed or all the designated homes or buildings. And if you notice, each one has its own number. And that we will also have as a second page to this PDF is a list of all of the properties. So you'll be able to look up this number, go on the list and find out what the address is, and then refer to the inventory that's on the website to find more information on the property. And eventually what we'd like to do is to add these property numbers to the inventory itself. So in the future, if someone is looking through the inventory and they want to know exactly where, property A is, they can find that number on this map. That will also be included on the inventory. So we're very excited about this, and hopefully we'll have another update for you soon.
Ooh, that was cool. Is it now? Can I share it with the Historical Society? Is that? It looked like it was on the website already.
It's not on the website. It's still drafts in draft form. So it's getting there, but we might have to tweak it a little bit. And once it is finalized, we're hoping to get it on the website. And then, yes, we can also provide the link to all HRH members.
Okay, well, we need to have a celebration when that happens, because that's I think a very positive thing. And I think much like Dan, the idea of getting a greater involvement with the community is great, and something like that is, this is cool. I think will help with that. So all very good. Okay, we're now on to item 6.3, designation subcommittee verbal update.
Right, Madam Chair, just procedurally, if we could just have a motion to receive that update and a vote. Thank you.
Sorry.
Nope.
Okay. Doris is okay. We all vote. Okay. Passed. Thank you. I'll get better at this. Okay. 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 Can we now moving on to 6.3, designation subcommittee verbal update? Is there anything there?
Here, I guess I'll say something. Nothing to report, Doris. I don't know that you had some things that you might be looking at or considering. We haven't had a chance to meet or anything, so nothing from my side.
The subcommittee needs to reconvene so that we can look at what we want to work on in the upcoming year. And so I think we'll be doing that shortly. So there's really no update at this time.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, the next date of our next meeting is October 12th, Tuesday, day after Thanksgiving. Okay. Okay, we can adjourn. Someone can move to adjourn. Doris, thank you. Seconded by David. We're all ready to adjourn. Okay, we motion to adjourn. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Great, thank you.
Stephen, is this it?
We're good, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank
you did fine.